Alright guys, what's going on? Derek James, GovKidMethod.com. Today you're going to want to pay attention. We are doing more bid proposal training. Today we're spending time and going deep on the three elements that are part of every proposal potentially. You've heard me talk about these three key elements in the past. Today I'm going to be answering what is it, why is it important, and is it required in every bid? And then I'm actually going to be showing you an example of what that could look like as part of a written proposal response to help further your learning and responding to government RFPs, RFQs in today's bid proposal training. And again, mastering these three elements as part of a government proposal response to whether it's a RFP or a RFQ is the minimum that any good government contracting proposal writer has mastered and can do. And I'm going to show you how to do it yourself so you can do it as a small business owner, as a team of 1, 2, or 3. You know, maybe you're watching this, doing this all by yourself. Guys, I know who you are. I know my audience. This is going to be tailored just for you so you can do this. Okay, so number one of the three elements is past performance. What is it? Past performance is demonstrated previous work that you've done in the past, whether it's on a government contract or a commercial contract. It doesn't matter, guys. The government accepts commercial work just as well as it accepts government contracts. It's very much seen as the whole chicken and the egg thing, like, well, how am I supposed to get a government contract if I need a government contract past performance to get it? Throw that out the window. You don't. That just does not exist. You can use any work that you've done in the commercial space for your business as satisfactory past performance. So why is this important? Well, obviously this is important on those particular solicitations where the government is using this as an evaluation factor on a job maybe they don't have a whole lot of tolerance and a whole lot of exposure to risk for. What do I mean by this? Well, if the government has a contract to restore the west wing of a hospital, and that's going to require 15 to 20 different construction trades to be managed, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, demolition, you name it, don't you think the government's going to want only contractors who have done similar work like this in the past? Doesn't that seem like a heck of a thing to mess up and take a chance on a contractor who's never performed anything to this scope or magnitude in the past? This is a real example of how the government can use past performance as an evaluation factor to make sure only contractors that even can stand a chance to bid on this and win this are even standing in line to go after it. Now, lastly, is this always required? Is past performance always required? I can almost even hear the eyes rolling from here with me recording this video. No, past performance is not always required. Like I said, the government uses it as an additional factor. Think of it like this: the higher the dollar value, the higher the visibility, the more damaging it could be if this thing gets messed up, the more likely government is going to use past performance as an evaluation factor, like in the example that we covered. So with that being said, that also means there are a lot of contracts that do not require past performance as an evaluation factor. Maybe it's more of a commodity type purchase, something more that you can't really mess up, or maybe it's just a job that's so small that it's underneath the simplified acquisition threshold, which is currently $250,000, that they're just not going to be asking for past performance. More so, they're just going to be asking for pricing and some bit of a technical approach. Maybe resume, depends on the type of job that it is. So now let's go ahead and take a look at what factors could be included in a written past performance in a government bid proposal. So in any good past performance write-up, you're going to have these elements at a minimum. You're going to have the project title. You're going to have the name of the customer. Again, whether it is a government customer or a commercial customer, it doesn't really matter. Government's going to want to see what is the magnitude, what was the dollar range, or what was the exact dollar value. When was the work performed? Most of the time, the government is going to be asking for jobs completed within the last 3 years. So you want to make sure that it is relevant in its timing and how long did it last. Next, this is a big one, but the scope. This is where you want to write a few sentences or a paragraph about the work that you actually did. And when you write this, it's important that you actually write in comparison to whatever job that you're trying to win. So here you want to show similarities. Again, you want to show a comparison saying, hey, we did this, and this is 80% the same as this particular bid. So, you know, we did a good job on this. We can do a good job on this future bid for you. And lastly, you're going to want some POC reference. Name, phone number, and email will do just fine. The government doesn't always call on these. I've had it both ways where they do and they don't. So you do want to notify whatever POC you are listing, but it's not always going to be called upon. Okay, so next is pricing. What is pricing? Well, it's fairly intuitive, but pricing is your price as a small business to perform the job of whatever bid it is you're responding to. this pricing should be rolled up. This should be your all-in pricing. You want to make sure that you don't miss any expenses. You want to have everything covered in this, and a general overarching pricing formula is going to look something like expenses plus overhead plus G&A and profit. And that's if the government allows you to list both overhead and G&A. Sometimes they don't think it's satisfactory for you to show both. So in which case you would have to change your numbers around to make sure that you're only showing overhead or G&A. But these are the elements that are going to consist of your pricing. If you don't know these numbers, if you don't know your numbers, you should probably stop. You should probably work with an accountant or just spend some time to figure out what your true costs are, and also calculate whatever general administrative or overhead costs are incurred to also perform on these contracts if you win them, because that's what the government typically asks for when they look for a pricing breakdown on your contracts. So why is pricing important? Well, obviously it's important because it's going to be one of the primary evaluation factors, especially for lowest price technically acceptable contracts, to determine who can perform the job for the lowest cost. So that is the obvious, but it also goes a lot deeper than that. Pricing is also a reflection of the work being performed, and sometimes, and more so should be, the value that's being offered. So oftentimes pricing can vary between bidders because maybe they're reading a scope of work differently. This is why the government has to put things out to bid. Maybe contractors come out with new inventive ways, and their pricing is going to reflect that secondary method or that secondary approach where everybody else is using the tried and true method. This is how the government goes about using pricing as a factor to eventually get the best value or find new and innovative ways by selecting contractors that can maybe do it for less. Or maybe it goes the other way and the contractor underbid it. They didn't fully understand the statement of work. And then they get, on the job and they say, we need more money. We didn't fully quote for that. We didn't plan for that. So it can really go both ways. So there really is a art and a science and a whole story and a whole narrative that goes on behind pricing. So it's not just the price to perform the job, but it truly is a reflection of the work being performed and the method and the value that's being delivered. And the more you're in government contracting, looking at competitive bids, seeing other bidders, different responses, seeing how they won the job, you get to understand that narrative a lot deeper. And lastly, is pricing always required on government solicitations, RFPs, RFQs? Yes, the answer is yes. Now, sometimes these pricings could be examples. For example, if they were trying to respond to what's called like a MATOC or maybe even a BPA, where you bid on an example job and then the government uses the pricing off of that to apply to future task orders that come out in the future. But either way, you'll still have to come up with real pricing for that example job. So yes, pricing is always going to be part of a solicitation response, and it's always going to be a very important evaluation factor. So let's go ahead and take a look at what a pricing response could look like in a proposal. So oftentimes you will see pricing in a table format. One thing you're going to always find is, pricing CLINs or some sort of line item separator to separate the tasks. It might be by year. It might be by the actual task that's being performed. It might be both even. In this example pricing table, you can see that we have a base year. We have a quantity, which is going to be based off of our unit, which is hours. This is very common for service contracts. And then the government's going to want to see the cost for 1 hour, essentially, and then the total cost for all of the hours. So it's commonplace for the government to want to see things on an individual incremental level, and then also a total aggregate level when it comes to filling out pricing tables or pricing CLINs. And then the way that this works is you go through and you fill out each one of these, and then you end up with a total at the bottom. Now, this is just one example of a pricing table. This is something that our GovCon Gold Rush students get access to. Actually, all these examples that I'm going to show you, GovCon Gold Rush students get access to all of these as part of our Proposal Builder Docs series in the program. But in addition to this, we're talking about pricing. You want to make sure that you consider wage determinations, whether it's Service Contract Act or Davis-Bacon. We link that up. You also want to consider just the different types of industries. So, pricing for a construction contract, estimating for that is going to be very different than pricing for, delivering some, air conditioners, or pricing for a staffing contract, okay? Or doing road salt. These 3-4 examples, the way that pricing is approached and the factors that are used and demonstrated in the table are all going to be a little bit different. But one thing that you can bank on is there's always going to be some sort of pricing CLIN, because these are actual CLINs. These are buckets of money. That's what a CLIN is, that the contracting officer funds and obligates funds to once the contract is awarded, the money is put in that bucket. Once the bucket is empty, it's very hard for them to move money around and refill it. So if you misquoted it, that's why it's on you, because there's no way to get more money in that bucket unless you're doing something like a request for equitable adjustment. We're not going to go there. There are some loopholes in the system to accommodate certain situations that is necessary. But typically speaking, you're going to be dealing with pricing CLINs, guys. And the government's going to give you a table. They're going to give you CLINs in a SF 1449 or a standard form 1442. And lastly, they may give you some sort of Excel sheet with the rows and columns already in there, and you just have to plug in your numbers. Okay, so the last of the three elements now, we've had past performance, we've had pricing. Now we are on technical or technical approach. So what is a technical approach? Technical approach, a good one, should always answer the question, how are you going to perform the work? If you can get that ingrained in your head and know anytime you hear technical, you don't freak out. You just replace that, freak out feeling with the question, how am I going to perform the work? That is going to get you 50 to 75% there. So why is this important? Well, it's important obviously because of the question. The government needs to know how are you going to perform the work. This is a tried and true method of the government asking you as a contractor, giving you an opportunity to demonstrate your understanding of the scope of work as the expert in the field. Again, contracting is not the expert in this particular job. Not typically. They're going to have, SMEs and engineers in the back scene helping them write this requirement, and those folks are experts, but contracting is not the expert. So they are giving you an opportunity to respond with a technical approach to demonstrate how are you going to do this. It's pretty hard to say how you're going to do something if you don't fully understand it. So it kind of goes hand in hand. It forces you to understand and read this thing and really get an understanding. Maybe it means asking questions to contracting, doing RFIs. Maybe it even means attending a site visit to further get questions answered and to get more information as required by you to fully even respond to this thing. Now, is a technical approach always required? No, a technical approach is not always required, but I would go as far to say there is always a little bit of a technical thing required, except for some instances where it's price only. Yes, there are price only contracts, especially if you go on something like Unison Marketplace where it's a reverse auction and they just want you to put in a number. Again, the margins are low. It could be a good past performance builder, but it's not what we're seeing on sam.gov. It's not really where you're going to see long-term contracts and things that are going to really build your business. So you don't want to run away from a technical approach. And at the very minimum, what I'm seeing is they're wanting to see specs. So they're wanting to see salient features. So for example, the recent example of the $1 million contract that I won for heavy equipment rental for USACE, I didn't have to do some big, long technical approach answering how are we going to provide this. But in addition to my pricing, I had to demonstrate the salient features of the equipment that we were going to be leasing. So the government could say, hey, you know what, is this equipment going to be satisfactory for what our needs are? Or are we going to deny this piece of equipment as an alternate and say, no, it's not good enough? The government wouldn't be able to do that if there wasn't this bit of technical portion of the contract requesting for these salient features of the equipment. Does that make sense? So that's really what I would say as a bare minimum in terms of a technical requirement required. Some details, a bit of a write-up, or it's just some information. On the other hand, the government could ask for definitely, a staffing approach, very common, quality control plan, very common, resumes. These are all very common things that you're going to need to know as a small business owner going after contracts that the contracting officer could ask for to further demonstrate how are you going to perform on this work. These are some examples. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of the examples I have for you. So like I said, this first example is a resume. So this is going to be good for proposing, FTEs, full-time or part-timers to work on a contract. If it is a services level contract, this may also be required if they're looking for key personnel on a contract, key people in the contract that are going to be managing it or performing in more of an administrative capacity. You're going to want to see the common elements of what you would see in a resume in terms of, the skill level and also their work history. They may be asking for an actual degree information. I think we're all pretty familiar with resumes, and just having a standard resume format is something great to have on hand. So if you have to slide something in, you can give this to a candidate, have them fill it out on their behalf, send it back to you, and then slide this into your proposal. Another good example of something that you want to have on hand is a good quality control plan. So this is an example templated quality control plan. Again, guys, These templates are all, actually these are new ones. So these are going to be made available very soon to our GovCon Gold Rush members. They already have some examples in the program, but these are templates that if you're in GovCon Gold Rush, you're going to be getting further access to. But a good QCP is going to be focused on the customer, actually focusing on the quality of services. And you're going to spend a lot of time talking about the actual day in, day out operational support. So you're going to see a lot of tasks that are there to basically support that and further demonstrate how you're going to actually maintain quality control over the lifetime of the contract. And then also having some sort of commitment to continuous improvement. If you're familiar with Kaizen, it's a great methodology to implement into your quality control plan. Here, this is just an example of something that if the government asked for a quality control plan, this is a template that you could start with and then tailor it and customize it to actually the bid you're going after and any specifics the government asks within your quality control plan. And then lastly, we just have another example here, which is a staffing plan. On the staffing plan, elements you can touch on is recruitment and hiring. It's sometimes good to have some, simple figures and illustrations in these. Employee development and training, employee retention, competitive salaries, benefits, annual performance appraisals, things like you would want to see to demonstrate to the government that you're going to be able to take care of your people and your people are going to be happy. Further explanation of the staff. You may even want to slide resumes into this potentially. Employee placement and monitoring, employee turnover. All of these things are great to be able to demonstrate. Not only can you, attract key talent, but you can retain them. And then what happens if they leave for another job or if the government hires them directly? How are you going to quickly backfill that position? All right, guys. So past performance, pricing, technical, those are the three elements that I want to give you so that you have in your toolbox. And today we even looked at some examples of what those all could look like in a written format for today's bid proposal training. So again, GovCon Gold Rush students are going to be getting access to these templates pretty soon here. And even more than this, I didn't show you all of them. So if that's something you're considering joining, I'm just trying to further show you guys the value that you're really getting when you join GovCon Gold Rush to go forward and bid and win on government contracts. If you like today's video, show me some love and click that like button. And if you are new here or you have not subscribed yet, but you're somebody who watches the videos but you haven't subscribed, consider subscribing to the channel. I'd love to have you as part of the community. But it's, again, just another way to show me some love that you support what I'm doing and that you think I should keep going with it and that you're getting value from it. So guys, I hope you got some value from today's bid proposal training. Before you bounce, consider watching this video or this video if you want additional training. Keep grinding, guys. It's the fourth quarter. I'm doing everything that I can to help you. Until the next video, I will see you very soon. Take care.